He filmed me in handcuffs as if capturing a trophy and smiled, the same smile that once whispered, "I'll take care of you." In that cold click of the metal, I understood. The love I had offered had become evidence against me. My name is Evelyn Brooks, and that morning filled with sirens, my living room smelled of disinfectant and damp wood dust. The portraits on my wall trembled while Alan's phone camera searched for my face like a target. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. My eyes touched the spot where, for years, the blue safe had sat. Small, discreet, keeper of the things I couldn't say out loud. Long before the humiliation, I had locked inside it dates, bank statements, echoes of conversations, suspicious signatures. He believed my silence was submission. It was strategy. In the back seat of the patrol car, I felt the seatbelt dig into my shoulder and the window reflect my pale face back at me. I did what I always told my patients to do when they were on the edge. Breathe in 4 counts, hold for 8, and ride the wave. The cop to my right smelled like burnt coffee. The one to my left avoided my gaze. I thought about the neglected garden, the cracked window he never fixed, and the wedding date that served as the safe's code. Alan's plan seemed perfect. Debts erased, guilt on me, his reputation spotless. What he didn't know was that when a woman learns to carry her silence, she also learns when to release it. If this story touches a scar you recognize, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me. Has anyone ever turned your love into a weapon? Your comment might be the key to someone else's safe. Before the downfall, there was a calm that now feels rehearsed. The house breathed routine. The hiss of the coffee maker, the rustle of newspaper pages as Alan read on the porch, the faint scent of mint I used to mask the damp paint clinging to old walls. I believed I was living in peace. Now I know. He was already studying me. While I watered the garden, Alan watered lies. The blue safe in the office held receipts, copies, innocent memories that, without my knowing, would one day become my salvation. Alan was the kind of man who could smile even in ruins. He spoke softly about investments, profits, tax adjustments. I, a retired nurse, trusted him. He took advantage of my domestic faith, that naive belief that love doesn't need vigilance. I remember his hands over mine saying, "Sign here, it's just a joint account." I signed. I signed so much it was as if I were sealing my own sentence. After the divorce, he left with the same charm he used to walk into my life. It took me time to understand that his silence wasn't distance. It was strategy. In the following months, I discovered he had kept accounts that never existed in our records, moved money under my name, and forged my signature on every document that promised financial stability. It was a slow plan, built in the dark, executed with the cold precision of a man changing skins. At night, while I slept, Alan typed. I imagined spreadsheets, but they were wire transfers. I imagined care, but it was control. And when the police knocked at my door, I realized that every paper I'd signed had become a brick in the prison he built for me. What he never anticipated was that, long before the love ended, I had already started collecting fragments of the truth, bank statements, dates, voices, and hid them inside the blue safe, like someone protecting seeds through winter, waiting for the right season to bloom. Now, when I remember him toasting my arrest, I think, a perfect plan only needs one small mistake to fall apart, and his mistake was underestimating the silence of a woman who sees everything. The metallic sound of the lock echoed like thunder inside my chest. The cell was small, damp, and smelled of iron and old soap. The thin mattress, the rough sheet, the cold radiating from the walls. Everything seemed designed to strip away any trace of humanity. But I didn't cry. Years in nursing had taught me that despair eats away faster than disease. I sat on the bed and watched the shadows move slowly across the cracked floor. I took a deep breath. If the world wanted to break me, I would learn to heal from within. The other women looked at me with a mix of pity and curiosity. I was the lady from the news, the one her husband had turned in. They avoided talking, but sometimes they left a piece of bread on the edge of my tray. No words were needed. There was a silent language among women who know what it's like to carry guilt that isn't theirs. At night, when the noise of the bars merged with the whispers from the corridor, I remembered the blue safe. Not as an object, but as a metal heart keeping what I couldn't forget. The copies, the signatures, the dates, the proof that he had used me. I closed my eyes and replayed every detail. The cold texture of the safe beneath my fingers, the click when I locked it for the last time, the code, the date of our wedding, now a cruel joke. In the dark, I spoke to myself without sound. Evelyn, don't scream. Plan. What Alan saw as weakness was only the pause between the strike and the answer. I knew sooner or later I'd be given a phone call. And when that moment came, I wouldn't call a lawyer. I would call Michael, the accountant who knew every move in our finances and who once told me, "Paper keeps secrets, even memory forgets." 3 days passed. On the morning of the 4th, a guard knocked on the bars. "Brooks, you've got a phone call." I stood up slowly, fixed my hair, and walked firmly to the phone. The sound of the cable swaying, the cold weight of the receiver, every detail felt amplified. I dialed Michael's number with the calm of someone activating a bomb that doesn't destroy. It liberates. When he answered, I spoke softly but steady. "Get the blue safe, Michael. The code is my wedding date, and if I'm not out of here by tomorrow, give everything inside to the district attorney." There was silence, the kind that comes right before the truth. Then he said, "Understood." I hung up, closed my eyes, and pressed my forehead against the cold metal wall. For the first time since my arrest, I felt something Alan would never understand, the serenity of someone who still holds her cards. The call lasted less than a minute, but its echo spread like an old warning. While I walked back to my cell, across town, Michael Hayes was locking his office door in a hurry, coat half on, eyes wide. He had always been methodical, every receipt in labeled folders, every contract dated with obsessive precision. But that day, no order could contain the urgency in my voice. When he arrived at my house, something felt off. The gate had a new padlock, the garden was dry, and the windows were veiled in dust. Still, the silence felt expectant, like the house itself was waiting for him. Michael checked under the ceramic pot. There it was, the spare key. He stepped inside carefully, the old floorboards groaning beneath his shoes. The air still smelled of lavender and paper, and in the corner of the office sat the blue safe. It looked heavier than he remembered, coated in dust, metal cold under his fingers. He turned the dial. 07-14-1988, the wedding date. The lock clicked. Inside, a thick folder, a flash drive, and a sealed envelope with my name written in black ink. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and read, "If you're reading this, it means he did what he promised. Deliver everything to the district attorney. Don't try to protect me." When he plugged in the flash drive, the screen flickered, folders labeled with dates, receipts, and emails. Alan had transferred large sums into non-existent accounts, all under my name. There were recordings too, business meetings, cold laughter. In one, his voice said clearly, "She's the perfect face. If anything goes wrong, it'll all fall on her." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. It was like hearing the truth tear the mask off charm. He picked up the phone and called David Walker, an old college friend who now worked as a prosecutor. "David, I've got proof of a major fraud. It's about the Brooks case." Silence. Then, "Bring it, now." He drove under Asheville's gray sky, the blue safe wrapped in a blanket on the back seat. The hum of the engine matched the pounding in his chest. When he handed over the evidence, David opened the folder slowly, flipping through every page, his expression hardening. "This changes everything," he said. Back in my cell, the air felt different. I didn't know it yet, but the tide had already turned. The blue safe, my silent guardian, was now breathing somewhere else, speaking for me, telling the truth my voice couldn't. 2 days after the call, the metallic sound of keys echoed differently. "Brooks, you've got a visitor." Hello. When I entered the interview room, there was Michael, exhausted, eyes sunken from sleepless nights, holding the same folder that once lived inside the blue safe. He placed it on the table and took a deep breath. "Evelyn, the district attorney has everything. The flash drive, the files, the recordings. Alan moved dirty money for years in your name. You're not the criminal, you're the victim. For a moment, the words just floated there, suspended in the air. Time itself seemed to stop. After days of silence and doubt, someone was finally saying what I had always known. Michael continued, "They're verifying everything. There are records of offshore transfers, forged contracts, false accounts, and the recordings? Your voice isn't in any of them, only his." He opened an envelope and slid a document toward me, stamped with the DA's seal. Defense witness, Evelyn Brooks. My whole body trembled. I didn't cry, but the air grew heavier, pressing down on my chest. The iron table was cold under my hands, and the distant echo of closing doors sounded like the world rearranging itself beyond the walls. "Walker wants to meet with you as soon as you're released," Michael added. "He said the safe was your best defense." I closed my eyes and saw the blue safe, now empty, its purpose fulfilled. Everything Alan thought I'd buried, I had turned into living memory. The forged signatures, duplicate checks, the emails where he wrote, "handling Evelyn's issue." Each proof was like a petal unfolding, revealing truth at its center. As we talked, a guard whispered something to her colleague. They exchanged glances, and for the first time, I saw respect in their eyes. When Michael left, he slipped a small note into my hand. "It's happening." Hours later, I heard the murmurs spread among the inmates. "Her husband's been arrested," someone shouted. I looked toward the narrow window and saw sunlight cutting through the bars. Alan, the man who laughed while I was handcuffed, now felt the same metal bite against his skin. I closed my eyes and imagined the sound of iron on his wrists. Destiny is patient, but precise. The silence of the cell, once a prison, had become a sanctuary. And for the first time since the beginning, the air moved with me, calm, alive. The truth had finally stepped out of the safe. The courtroom was full. The murmur of reporters, the burst of camera flashes, the scent of polished wood mixed with cheap perfume from the crowd. I walked in wearing handcuffs, but with my head high. Not out of pride, out of dignity. Alan was already there, dressed in a dark suit, hair perfectly combed, wearing the same practiced smile he'd used to deceive the world. The man who once filmed my humiliation now posed for cameras, believing he still controlled the story. I sat behind my attorney and watched District Attorney David Walker open a folder. On the cover, the DA's seal, and beneath it, a small blue sticker, the same shade as the safe. It was as if fate itself wanted to remind me, nothing truly gets lost when it's kept with purpose. The judge called for silence. Walker began, "Your Honor, we are presenting new evidence in the Brooks case, digital files, bank statements, and recorded conversations." Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Alan kept his chin raised until the first audio began to play. His own voice filled the courtroom. "Sign it under her name. She trusts too much to question anything." The entire room fell silent. Not a single reporter moved. The judge rested his chin on his hand and stared. Alan tried to laugh, but no sound came out. He tugged at his tie, checked his watch, pretending calm. Then another recording, him instructing an employee to move funds to Caribbean accounts, the full scheme, drawn in his own voice. His lawyer asked for a recess, but the judge cut him off. "No, counselor, we'll hear everything." I looked at Alan's face. The smile dissolved. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and the familiar expression of control, the one I'd known too well, was gone. When the judge ordered him into custody, the audience murmured softly. Cameras captured the exact moment the man who once handcuffed me lowered his head before the truth. As I heard the clink of metal, I closed my eyes. The sound was the same as the morning of my arrest, but this time it meant something else. Justice. While they led him away, Alan glanced at me one last time. He tried to hold my gaze, but shame weighed heavier than steel. I didn't speak. I just looked back. Steady, whole. On my way out, a reporter asked, "Evelyn, what does it feel like to see the man who destroyed you in handcuffs?" I answered calmly, "The truth doesn't rush. It just waits for space to breathe." And I walked out of that courtroom feeling the sun on my face, the same sun now shining over his chains. The days after the trial were quiet, but not the silence of confinement, the silence before a new beginning. I could feel the lightness of freedom again, the smell of fresh coffee, the whistle of the kettle greeting me every morning. Still, the world outside wouldn't stop talking. Headlines, comments, judgments. And in the middle of all that noise, a gentle knock on the door changed everything. When I opened it, I saw a face I never thought I'd see again. Martha Brooks, my ex-mother-in-law. She looked smaller somehow, eyes glassy, a folder trembling in her hands. For a moment, time folded in on itself. I saw the woman who once shared recipes with me, who scolded me for not taking proper care of her son, who treated me like an outsider in my own home. Now, her voice cracked as she said, "Evelyn, I was wrong about you." I stepped aside to let her in. The house smelled of lavender and old wood. She sat at the table and placed the folder on top. I found messages from him, things I can't stay silent about anymore. I opened the envelope and read. Alan mocking her, calling me the old woman who pays my bills, bragging that he'd get rid of the saint soon. The words cut deeper than any sentence. Martha wiped her tears. I spent my life defending the wrong son, and I destroyed the right woman. Her hands shook. I've already given copies to the press. If his name's going down, mine can go with it. I'm done pretending. The next morning, the headline spread everywhere. Mother of the accused hands over evidence against her own son. The whole country watched that fragile woman bear the weight of blood and truth, and suddenly I was no longer the accused. I became the woman who survived. That night, I sat on the porch. The cool wind slid over my skin, carrying back Martha's words. You were the only one who ever truly loved him. I thought of the blue safe, how every truth needs courage to be opened, even when it hurts. Slowly, I realized that what Martha had brought me wasn't just proof. It was a mirror. The reflection I needed to finally see the whole woman I'd always been. I closed my eyes and whispered, blood can betray, but truth heals even the wounds we thought were beyond saving. Coming home felt like reopening an old wound only to find flowers growing inside. The rusty gate still groaned the same sorrowful note, but hanging from it now was a new sign. Private property, Alan Brooks. I stopped in front of it, feeling the weight of metal and memory. That house had been my refuge, my shelter, the stage for every silence and every hope. And now it stood as proof that he had tried to erase even my right to exist there. Michael walked beside me, papers in hand, eyes steady. He registered the property in his name alone, he said, opening a folder filled with documents recovered from the blue safe. But he forgot that the past also has a signature. Among the pages lay an old yellowed contract, notarized and stamped. Alan's signed donation of half the house to me more than 20 years ago. Michael smiled faintly. This document is your root. We went inside. The air smelled of dust and memory. Every step echoed hollow through the walls that had heard too much. The photos were still on the shelves, covered in gray, and the broken window, the one he never repaired, threw streaks of light across the floor. I touched the doorframe and felt the chill of the wood, as if the house itself was asking, "Do you still want me?" And in my mind, I answered, "Yes, but differently." At the property hearing, Alan appeared in handcuffs. Same suit, same eyes that once convinced me. When the judge asked for the property documents, Alan smirked. That contract was destroyed years ago. The prosecutor raised the original copy, the one rescued from the blue safe, and said, "Nothing true is ever lost, Mr. Brooks. It just waits to be found." The silence in the courtroom was heavy. The judge compared the signatures, then after a few moments declared, "This property is hereby restored to Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, as per valid and recorded donation." The sound of the gavel was soft, but echoed like thunder inside me. I left without looking back. At the gate, I tore down the sign with my own hands. The metal edge cut my skin, and a drop of blood fell to the ground. It stung, but the pain felt alive, almost cleansing. That night, I stood in the middle of the living room, windows open, wind sweeping away the dust. Then I walked into the garden. The soil was dry, almost lifeless. I knelt, touched the earth, and whispered, "You'll bloom again." I took a small trowel, dug a shallow hole, and from my bag pulled out a key, the key to the blue safe. I buried it there, right at the center, like someone planting an old secret that had already fulfilled its purpose. As I covered the hole, I smelled the rain approaching, the same scent that had followed me on the day of my arrest. But now, it meant something else. It smelled like a beginning. I stood there, hands dirty, soul clean, watching the first drops fall on the ground. Each one sounded like forgiveness. And for the first time in years, the house didn't confine me. It held me. The garden began to wake under the rain, as if each drop was calling something back to life. I watched the earth drink what it needed and thought, that's how the soul heals, slowly, drop by drop. The case was still in the headlines, but the tone had changed. Evelyn Brooks, the woman who defeated her own accuser. I avoided reading, but Michael told me people were moved, that women across the country were reaching out. I thought he was exaggerating, until one call changed everything. Her name was Sarah Mills. Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. "Mrs. Brooks, I used to work for your ex-husband. There are things you need to know." We met quietly at the district attorney's office, in a corner room away from the press. When she walked in, I saw it immediately. The blend of fear and relief that only someone who's been an unwilling accomplice can carry. "I did what he told me," she confessed, staring at her hands. "I signed your name on documents, faked contracts. He said it was just to make things easier. But when I saw the video of him laughing during your arrest, I realized who he really was." Walker sat beside me, silent and focused. Sarah opened a folder, papers, receipts, recordings. In one of them, Alan's voice sounded cold, deliberate. "If anything goes wrong, she'll take the blame. The old woman won't even understand what hit her." Walker nodded to his team of analysts and said quietly, "This closes the case." I looked at Sarah. Her hands trembled, but her eyes glowed with courage. "I know nothing can erase what I did," she said softly, "but I want you to know I'll never stay silent again out of fear." I held her hands and replied, "Fear only grows in the dark, dear. Thank you for turning on the light." In the following days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Women from everywhere, widows, divorcees, survivors, calling to thank me. But in truth, I was the one grateful for them. My story, which began locked inside a blue safe, had become a web of voices, a quiet current of strength connecting us all. One afternoon, I found a letter in the mailbox. No sender, just a single line. "Watching you stand tall reminded me that it's never too late to begin again." My chest tightened and tears came, not of sorrow, but belonging. Sarah became a key witness. During her testimony, she looked Alan straight in the eyes and said, "She taught me what courage without shouting looks like." The courtroom went silent. That moment wasn't just about justice. It was about freeing every woman who had ever been silenced. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the patch of garden where I had buried the safe's key. Tiny green shoots were sprouting from the soil. Each one felt like a message from life itself. What's planted in truth always blooms, even after the storm. And for the first time since it all began, I realized this story no longer belonged just to me. It belonged to all of us. Of all the wounds Alan left behind, Emma was the deepest. Her distance felt like an echo that came back hollow, a love that wanted to reach me but kept colliding with walls built out of lies. From the beginning, she believed him. She told neighbors I was confused, that I needed help. He had painted a portrait of me in her mind, a mother broken, bitter, unstable. And the worst part was that, for a while, I almost believed it too. When I was released, I still hadn't heard from her. I spent my days cleaning the house, watering the garden, trying to get used to the sound of the wind without fear. The blue safe, now empty, sat on the shelf like a reminder, a guardian that had fulfilled its purpose. but nothing inside it was heavier than Emma's silence. It was on a cloudy afternoon, during a televised hearing, that the truth finally reached her. The prosecutor played one of the last recordings. Alan, laughing over the phone, saying, "Emma believes everything I tell her. She's my best weapon." His voice crossed the country and went straight to our daughter's heart. Hours later, I heard the front gate creak open. The sound was the same as when she was a child, running home from school yelling, "Mom!" But this time, it came slower, heavy with guilt. She stepped inside, eyes glassy, voice trembling. "I saw it, Mom. I saw everything." I couldn't speak. She walked closer, and before any words could fit between us, we just hugged. A long, heavy embrace filled with all the pain we had carried in silence. "He fooled me, Mom," she sobbed. "I defended him, and he destroyed you." I stroked her hair, the same gesture from when she was little, and whispered, "He didn't destroy anything, my love. He only revealed what I was always capable of rebuilding." We stayed up all night, tea and memories keeping us company. I told her stories I'd never told before. She listened quietly, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling. When morning came, the sunlight slipped through the windows, and she said, "I want to be with you at the next hearing. I want him to see I'm no longer his ally." And she was. Mother and daughter, side by side in court. Alan looked up, then quickly looked away. For the first time, I saw shame in him. When Emma took the stand, she lifted her chin and said clearly, "My father used my trust the same way he used hers. But today I know who the real strength in this family always was." The courtroom fell silent. I breathed deeply and felt the weight of history being rewritten, one line at a time. Back home, we walked through the garden together. The tiny shoots had grown into small flowers. Emma knelt, touched the soil, and whispered, "These grew from what he tried to bury, didn't they?" I smiled. "Yes, my love, from the same earth he thought was dead." In that moment, I understood. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It turns pain into fertile ground. The courtroom was packed again. The echo of footsteps across the marble floor sounded like the heartbeat of something about to explode. Emma and I walked in side by side, ignoring the flash of cameras and the whispers from the crowd. The air smelled of paper, coffee, and tension thick enough to taste. Alan stood at the front, handcuffed, still wearing the look of a man who thought he could bend the world to his will. But the world had already changed. He just hadn't realized it yet. District Attorney David Walker opened the session with the calm precision of someone holding lightning in his hand. "Your Honor, this case isn't just about fraud. It's about betrayal of trust, the destruction of dignity, and the manipulation of love used as a weapon." He laid out the documents, the messages, the recordings. Each piece of evidence was another stone pulled from the wall of lies Alan had built. Emma held my hand so tightly her nails marked my skin, but I didn't let go. The judge ordered silence as Walker played the final recording, Alan laughing while arranging to siphon charity funds, his voice dripping with arrogance. "If I get caught, the old woman can take the blame." The entire room froze. Even the air felt suspended. Alan's lawyer stood up slowly and said, defeated, "Your Honor, there is no defense left. We only ask that the court consider my client's age during sentencing." The judge nodded, then turned toward me. "Mrs. Brooks, would you like to say something before the verdict is delivered?" I rose to my feet. My legs trembled, but my voice didn't. For 30 years, I believed love meant silence, that protecting someone meant enduring the unbearable. But now I understand. Silence without truth is just another kind of prison, and I've already been in one. Never again. A low murmur rippled through the room. Alan looked up, his expression collapsing. "You ruined my life," he muttered. I met his eyes and replied, "No, I just stopped letting you ruin mine." The judge took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice firm, echoing through the hall like a storm. "Alan Brooks, this court sentences you to 17 years in prison for fraud, forgery, defamation, and embezzlement. You are also ordered to make full restitution to Mrs. Evelyn Brooks." The gavel hit the bench, and the sound carried like thunder. I turned to Emma. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of relief. The metallic click of Alan's handcuffs followed, a sound that felt almost like music. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, but none of that mattered, because the real justice wasn't in the sentence. It was in the fact that I was still standing. As we walked out, a reporter called, "Evelyn, what would you tell other women living what you went through?" I paused, looked straight into the camera and said, "Tell the truth, even if it's hidden in a dusty safe. Lies make noise, but truth lasts forever." As Emma and I stepped into the sunlight, the rays hit the courthouse windows, casting a strip of soft blue light across the floor, the same shade as the safe, the same shade as freedom. That night, the world felt suspended. The city outside was calm, a gentle wind making the curtains sway as the clock struck 9. After months spent surviving courts, cameras, and whispers, I craved something simple. I pulled out the old pans from the drawer, the ones with loose handles that had survived every year of my marriage. The metallic sound as they touched the counter felt almost familiar, like an old conversation between me and time itself. I cooked the same dinner I used to make on our anniversaries, herb-roasted chicken with buttered vegetables. The smell filled the house, mixing past and present into something almost tender. But this time, the meal wasn't to celebrate love. It was to celebrate freedom. I set the table for two out of habit, then smiled to myself. The chair across from me stayed empty, and for the first time, I liked it that way. I took the blue safe, wiped the dust off, and placed it on the table where his plate would have been. Inside were only two things: a copy of the court sentence and a small dried flower that had fallen from the garden. I closed my eyes, touched the cool metal, and whispered, "You guarded my pain. Now guard my peace." I sat down, poured a glass of wine, and raised it to the silence. Outside, the wind hummed through the trees, the same sound that once kept me awake in despair. Only now, every gust seemed to whisper, "It's over." As I ate, memories drifted through me. The cell, the cuffs, his smirk. Then I realized something simple but profound. The opposite of revenge isn't forgiveness. It's indifference. And finally, I felt it. The sound of the door opening broke my thoughts. Emma stood there, smiling. "Smells like childhood," she said, sitting down beside me. I served her a plate. We sat quietly for a while, then started laughing. Laughing at irony, at fate, at life's stubborn insistence on blooming again. After dinner, we stepped into the garden. A soft drizzle fell, and the earth, once dry and lifeless, now smelled rich and alive. Emma pointed to the small sprouts growing where I had buried the safe's key. "They're lilies, Mom." I smiled. The truth always flowers when lies are buried. We went back inside, and before bed, I opened my journal. I wrote, "Tonight, love didn't hurt. Silence didn't weigh heavy. Home finally breathed again." I closed the notebook as the candle flame flickered in the wind, soft, steady, like a quiet light learning how to shine on a new beginning. The dawn of that day arrived quietly but carried whispers through every street corner, every cafe, every news channel. One name echoed everywhere: Evelyn Brooks. The sun had barely touched the rooftops when the local radio announced solemnly, "Man convicted after framing ex-wife for his own crimes." The headline spread faster than a summer storm. The images showed Alan being led away in handcuffs, head down, pale-faced. And ironically, that same smile, the one that once wounded me, now humiliated him in front of an entire nation. I watched the report without anger. What I felt was a strange kind of calm, the peace that doesn't come from victory, but from closure. I never wanted glory, I just wanted quiet. On the screen, the camera zoomed in on a small detail. On the DA's table beside the evidence sat a sticker, blue, the same shade as the safe. I couldn't help but smile. What began as a secret had become a symbol of justice. Throughout the day, neighbors who had once avoided me began knocking at my door, some with flowers, some with apologies. An elderly woman with trembling hands took mine and said, "You spoke for all of us who were called crazy when we were just being betrayed." I had no words, so I simply embraced her. In that hug, I realized the blue safe had never only kept documents, it had preserved the voices of women who'd never been heard. Television programs replayed the trial, the prosecutor's voice firm and steady. This woman turned silence into evidence, and patience into power. Each word returned a piece of my dignity. While Alan adjusted to the same cell he once imagined for me, I walked barefoot through the garden, watching the lilies open beneath the sun. The wet soil reflected light, and in every petal, I saw the reflection of what had survived inside me. Days later, I received a letter stamped from the penitentiary. Inside were only a few words, written in the handwriting that once fooled me. "You won without destroying me. That's what hurts the most." I folded the paper and set it aside, not out of hatred, but compassion. The lesson had already been delivered. The case became a national story. Magazines and talk shows spoke of the woman who fought injustice and won without raising her voice. But what moved me most weren't the headlines. It was the flood of letters that started arriving. Strangers from distant cities shared their stories. One wrote, "I buried my own key, and for the first time, I slept in peace." Another said, "Your blue safe became my symbol." That's when I understood. The blue safe was no longer just mine. It existed in every home where a woman decided to guard her truth, her dignity, her limits. It had become a symbol of protection and of hope. The DA invited me to speak at a conference on financial abuse and domestic fraud. I hesitated, but Emma insisted. "Mom, tell your story. Show them that patience can also be a weapon." I stood on a simple stage, took a deep breath, and began, "They said I was weak because I loved, but real love isn't submission, it's clarity. And when clarity is wounded, it becomes truth." The audience rose in long applause, tears, smiles, hands joined. And in that moment, I realized something. The sound of justice isn't a gavel hitting wood. It's the chorus of many voices saying, "I survived too." That evening, the sunset poured gold over the garden. Emma waited on the porch with 2 cups of tea. "Look," she said, pointing at the lilies. "They look like lights." I smiled, feeling the wind brush through my hair. "They are lights, darling. Lights the years lit where pain once tried to dim them." As the sun disappeared behind the hills, I walked inside and closed the door gently. The blue safe still sat on the shelf, now unlocked, reflecting the candlelight. I touched its lid and whispered, "Thank you for keeping what I didn't yet know how to say." The city could keep talking about me. I didn't mind, because for me, the real news was silence. That peaceful silence that only comes when the soul finally understands it has won. The months that followed weren't filled with triumph or noise. They were quiet, deliberate, like stitching an old fabric by hand. The district attorney's office processed restitution slowly but steadily. Part of the money was returned by court order, another portion frozen for moral damages. I used the first payment to repair what deceit had cracked. I replaced the window in the office, sanded the floorboards that creaked with memories, repainted the walls a soft cream that caught the morning light like a daily blessing. In the hallway, where a private property sign once hung, I placed a small wreath woven from branches of my own garden, declaring without words that this house was no longer a possession. It was a home. The blue safe found a new place in the living room, open, no longer a vault, displaying only 2 things, a copy of the verdict and a single dried lily petal. Every afternoon, I dusted it gently, like thanking an old guardian who had finished its watch. I sorted folders and photos at my own pace. What still hurt went into sealed boxes. What still nourished me went into frames. With every small act of order, a piece of myself returned. In the garden, I planted new seeds over the spot where I'd buried the safe's key. I watered them without hurry, speaking softly to the earth. And when the first green stems broke through the soil, I understood. My story had chosen to grow. Reconciliation with Emma grew the same way, not through speeches, but through gestures repeated quietly. Evening walks, mint tea on cold nights, brief calls just to say, "I got home safe." One day she arrived with a wooden box filled with newspaper clippings from the trial and old birthday photos. "We'll hang them only if you want to, Mom." I did, not as trophies, but as reminders that what's remembered with dignity never turns into ghosts. Martha, my former mother-in-law, began visiting on Sundays, bringing apple pie less sweet and conversations more honest. During one visit, she placed a small bundle on my table, 2 worn wedding bands that had belonged to her mother. "For Emma, when the time comes," she said. "Let them pass from hand to hand without repeating our story." I held the gift carefully and understood. Forgiveness doesn't erase. It chooses not to continue the pain. As for Alan, a formal letter arrived through his lawyer. Belated apologies asking for understanding. I answered with silence. Justice had already spoken for both of us. Instead of dwelling on resentment, I accepted the hospital's invitation to lead a workshop for caregivers about financial abuse prevention. I taught them how to keep copies, authenticate documents, and record agreements within the law. At the end, a widow hugged me and whispered, "Today, I finally know where to start." That night, I sat on the floor among empty boxes and the scent of fresh paint, letting the house teach me its new sound. It wasn't the silence of humiliation anymore, nor the tense waiting of before. It was the quiet that can be lived in. I touched the lid of the blue safe and for the first time felt that it no longer guarded what was, but what will be. The scars remained, firm as roots. And I realized something profound. Roots aren't chains. They're foundations. It's been a year since the day love became evidence of a crime. Time has settled over my life like a fine layer of dust on old furniture, not to hide, but to remind me that even shine needs stillness. Now the house smells of coffee and jasmine. The garden is filled with white lilies, and at its center lies the small mound where I buried the blue safe's key. The flowers have grown around it, as if the past itself had chosen to bloom in peace. Sometimes I sit there, listening to the wind. It no longer carries the sound of sirens, only the song of birds that have come back home. The blue safe remains on the shelf, open, empty, and paradoxically, full of everything I've learned. It reminds me that keeping something safe isn't the same as hiding it. It's preserving it until the world is ready to understand. I look at it and think of all the women who've written to me, saying they too have their own blue safe, a drawer of evidence, a diary, a memory that kept them standing when the world tried to silence them. I think of them and smile. Emma has moved out but visits every weekend. She brings flowers, laughter, and simple stories. Sometimes we just sit in silence, watching the garden, and within that silence lives a peace Alan will never know. He's still behind bars. I'm still free, not just in body but in spirit. If I had to sum it all up, I'd say this. Patience is the silence of strength, and forgiveness is its rest. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you for listening to my story. And remember, no one has the right to turn your love into a prison. If someone ever tries to silence you, remember my safe. Remember the woman who used silence as a shield and truth as her voice. Now tell me, have you ever faced an injustice that forced you to be reborn? Share it in the comments. Your story might inspire another woman not to give up. Leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that dignity isn't something you lose, it's something you reclaim. Because in the end, justice isn't what happens in the courtroom, it's what blooms every day inside those who choose not to surrender.